What happens when a man raised in chaos decides to rewrite his story? My guest today is Jason Gutsell, a man who grew up in a turbulent environment and was exposed to drugs by the age of 12, a path that led to years of escapism and eventually life as a high-functioning stoner. We explore how his turning point came after a breakdown in Ibiza, where he realized something had to change. From rebuilding his identity through calisthenics, breathwork, and visualization, to finding stillness in New Zealand and redefining success through balance and family. This is a story about resilience, belief, and the power of taking ownership of your environment and mindset. Lots to learn from Jason's story. If you found value from it, support the mission. Please subscribe and leave a review. It really helps the show grow, and it means that we can reach more men who are ready to take that next step. Thank you so much. I'm Harrison, and this is the Growth Voyage Podcast. Enjoy. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Most welcome, brother. Tell me a bit about your background then. What shaped you into the man you are today?
What shaped me? So first of all, my book is called Becoming Limitless. The platform I've got is called The Limitless Platform. And my whole lifestyle, the whole ethos is about becoming the limitless version of yourself. But before all of that, there's quite a history of when I grew up around chaos, took drugs from a very early age, had a bit of a dysfunctional household, let's say. And over the years, partied, took drugs, spent 2 summers in Ibiza, which was mental. Used to stay up 4 or 5 days at a time, taking things. And then it got to a point where I think my body and brain had enough. I had this bit of a realization that I needed to kind of turn my life around, and got into fitness, got into fasting, which has been a massive part of my life. And then around 6 years ago, got into calisthenics, which again, another big part of my life, has completely changed who I am. It's helped me, not only that, I mean, there's a lot of things that's helped me navigate this journey, but I smoked weed for 22 years and I managed to break that addiction. Weed for me was like crack cocaine for a crackhead. Like, it was that bad. But yeah, I think from a very young age, I felt like I was kind of destined for more. I don't know what it was. Well, I feel like I got some of it from my dad. When he was young, he was a boxer. At his age, he was one of the best boxers in the country. And I always had this belief that if he could do something great, then I could. And I always believe this, that if other people can do great things, then you can too, because at the end of the day, we're all just humans and we're all capable of a lot more than people think. And so that kind of, it's always been in the back of my mind. I feel like I do get a lot of kind of determination, resilience, a lot of great qualities from my mother. So it's kind of a blend between the two. I've just kind of had a bit of a different mindset since my teens. Obviously, going through taking drugs and stuff, I had that mindset in the back of my mind, but I don't know, it was kind of just hidden away. And then I think after my second summer in Ibiza of just like partying and just completely ruined myself, it was like, okay, I feel like I'm coming to the end of a chapter. I was like 23 years old, and I feel like I was like, okay, maybe now is the time that I'm supposed to kind of start evolving and putting some effort into my life, and then that's kind of where all the self-development and everything started. And
Well, I know there's so much to uncover about your journey. I want to rewind to the beginning because you mentioned there's a lot of chaos there, and although there was this chaos and a lot of smoking weed and this feeling of being behind and kind of in a different world at that point. You're not really exposed to reality. But then you mentioned there that your old man gave you a sense of belief just by him being him.
Uh-huh.
So I want to find out what's going on in your head at that point. Are you ambitious going into your teens, perhaps, and especially when you're exposed to drugs at such an early age? In your mind, was it escapism, or was it purely just a sense of, oh, I'm young, this is cool? Where was that line between, okay, this is a serious problem, and oh no, this is just me being young? And then where does the self belief tie into that too?
Yeah, so some of it was obviously some of it was just being young, but when I look back now, there was a lot of escapism, a lot, because I mean I know from myself now, well not now, but going back a few years, that the weed was an escape from the burnout. The weed was an escape from the world, from the pressure of business, from the pressure of doing so much. And I look back now and I'm like, I was smoking at such a young age. I'm talking like, 12-year-old smoking a lot of weed and then going on to drinking and taking drugs at like 12, 13-year-old. There was a lot of escapism when I look back. My dad was an alcoholic, and the best of the time, for most of the time, we didn't really get on. When he was sober, lovely man, like really, really nice bloke. But when he was drunk, he would just kind of change, and you couldn't be in the room with him for more than 5 minutes, and you would just be arguing about anything. And there's uh, in my household, two of my brothers autistic. One of them who recently passed away a few years ago, but two autistic brothers, and then my other brother uh, and myself both had big personalities. So you can imagine, like, it could kick off, and there was just like a lot of shouting, a lot of arguing, um, fighting, and stuff like that. And so for me, I would be out of the house as much as I could be, and a lot of that, there's nothing to do on the streets apart from to entertain yourself, was drinking, taking drugs, smoking, that kind of thing. So it was a lot of escapism, I would say. Don't get us wrong; some of it was just being young and daft and having a laugh. But when I look back now, like, a lot of why I did that was probably to be out of the house and just to escape that reality.
I wonder if at the time this is considered normal for you. Is this just your sense of reality, even the stuff at home? Or did you know at the time, okay, something's not right here, this is different, or this isn't as normal as maybe other households? I don't know what normal is, by the way. I don't think there is a normal, but you know what I mean?
I don't think there is, and while I had a chaotic childhood, there's other people who have it a lot worse. And speaking to other people, when I've kind of explained these things, and they're like, they shared their kind of like how they grew up, and it's like, I think when you are young, you think, like, this was my normal, but I just thought, oh, this is just us. We just, like, this is the type of family we are. Everybody else has got it together. um, and you don't realize, like, everybody's got their own problems. Everybody's got things going on. There's stuff going on in everybody's families. So when I share my things in my book or whatever, it's not from a victim mentality or anything. It's just to explain who I am, where I came from. And I feel like I've came a long way because, like I say, taking those things at such a young age, I could have went down a completely different path.
Yeah, massively. And on that point, though, I think it's important to mention, because I mean, what you've mentioned there, I know you've pretty much only scratched the surface. Because chaos. I mean, that's just a word, right? I'm sure there's lots of different incidents. Perhaps I know you and your brother, lots of big personalities there, young men filled with testosterone. Yeah, there's going to be a lot going on, and I think it's important to highlight that. But then also how I don't think it matters what your type of trauma was, because like you said, everyone's gone through something and it's the meaning we apply to it. A great example is a kid dropping an ice cream. when a kid drops an ice cream, for them, it's the end of the world. It's like, no, and there's no end in sight, and you're just crying, crying, crying. You go into a meltdown, and that is their end of the world. And in the same way, it doesn't really matter. Of course, there's going to be like horrific experiences on a different scale. But at the same time, I think it's important to consider that it's the meaning we apply to it, and that can go super deep for a lot of us. So I really wanted to highlight that, and I think we do have a tendency to downplay stuff as well. Like you said, of course, lots of people are struggling, but it doesn't mean that yours weren't really significant, really significant as well. And and I'm intrigued to hear, growing up then, where you sort of cultivated a bit of self belief, and what do you think stops you from going down that path where it could have been really, really bad, especially when you've been exposed to drugs at such a young age?
Trauma experiences, they are all relevant to each other, and kind of, you're right, you shouldn't kind of downplay them. And that brings us back to a time when I lived in London. So I was seeing a girl who was at the time when I was living there. She was Nigerian, and I was explaining this stuff to her, like explaining, where I grew up and things in my family and stuff. And she took it as if she was like, well, yeah, so I used to have to go and walk to get water from the well every day. And I was just like, look, it's not a competition. I was just trying to kind of explain where I was coming from, like explain my kind of like growing up. And but yeah, it's like everybody's background, everybody's trauma or whatever. It's all very relevant to them, whatever it is. Whether it is the kid dropping the ice cream, or whether it is growing up in a crazy household like that.
100%. And a lot of the time, it is a projection, right? So what can you do? And what I was also keen to touch upon was this sense of self belief. And what I'm really intrigued by is what stops you from going down one path, which would have ended up worse, and then instead of that, continuing down the path that you did go on. And I'm well aware that there are many different roadblocks and struggles along the way of changing your life around. But talk me through that point.
I think so. I would always believed in myself, and I'd always did have that kind of deep feeling that I was going to do something good with my life. The other side of it was, I was taking substances, but when it came to the second time, I spent 2 summers in Ibiza. When it came to the second time spending, I spent the last 2 weeks then, like I must have been awake for maybe 10 days of it. And I remember just being, a shadow of my former self, just mentally, physically, just drained. I remember walking up to my apartment, just barely getting up the stairs, drinking water, just being sick everywhere, couldn't keep anything down. And it was at that point, after, I'm talking, I've been drinking pretty much every weekend, taking things from, 2000 and 2002 to 2013. So a good like 10 years of drinking, taking things. And I just got to a point where it was like, I need to not do this stuff anymore, because it started to mentally affect me. And then hangovers were like 2-3 days long. And so that's when I kind of stopped taking things and taking hard drugs, let's say. And when I came back from Ibiza, I went back into kind of IT contracting, and I just had this belief that I didn't know where I was heading, but I was just going to stick in and just do the best that I can anywhere I was. And I went from contract to contract, had a couple of permanent jobs along the way where I got offered permanent jobs. One of them was London, worked for a big law firm, one of the biggest law firms in the world. And yeah, just I think what fed into that is like having that belief at a young age, but then going on this journey of like, I believed in myself. I didn't know where I was heading, but I seemed to go from job to job, and each job was getting better. I was getting paid more, till I like kindly finally landed this amazing job working for this international law firm. I got the opportunity to go to New Zealand for 3 months on a secondment, everything paid for. And it was at that moment when I was in New Zealand, standing on the balcony, looking out into the city of Auckland, just thinking, how the fuck did... Sorry if I'm swearing on this. I don't know, swearing's allowed.
We're not PG here, brother. You can
Okay, cool.
say what you like.
I mean, I've been talking about all sorts.
Well, I'm really intrigued by that, because in your case, it sounds like you always had that belief in yourself, but it was the habits keeping you back. But there's such a big difference there, because some people, I think, believe they can change, but then they're not really motivated to do it. So did you have evidence then that things were about to improve? Or was there a little light and this experience where you're hungover, you're contemplating life? I imagine that happened several times over.
Yeah.
So what made it that one as opposed to the other benders before?
Spending, the majority, like, I'm talking partying in Ibiza, like, not sleeping for 5 days, taking all sorts of things, and it just completely ruined my brain. And I was into health and fitness from a young age, not as much as I am now, but I was into the gym. Specifically when I was like 18, 19-year-old, I was lifting some heavy weights. Like I was lifting heavier than most guys in the gym. So, I didn't know what it was, but, to be lifting the weights that I was, I'm talking like deadlifting 230 kilos, benching 150 kilos, like at such a young age, I had that, I knew that I could do something, like, and I just felt, so going from that to a few years later, feeling frail, fragile, after ruining yourself, partying for days on end. In my mind, I'm like, what are you doing? Because look at the things that you've already achieved, lifting that heavy at such a young age. And then I've just went and ruined myself to a point where I'm like, I've lost a lot of weight, no longer training. So there was kind of two sides where I would cycle backwards and forwards, or cycle round and round, like you're saying.
Well, this is a good point. This is a great point, because I think the path of growth isn't linear. It's not linear at all. And even then, even when you set an intention to change your life, what's going to happen is you might make some progress, then you'll have a pattern where you're falling back into those old patterns, and it will happen again and again and again. But I think that's expected, because you're going to keep on learning the same lessons until it finally clicks. And I think that's part of the journey. You're going to keep on stumbling. You're going to keep on navigating your way through, not really having a clue what you're doing, but you will get there eventually. And I think it takes a lot of trialing and error. Yeah, definitely.
It does. Like, you'll keep getting the same lessons come up until you kind of learn those lessons. And for me, it took years of understanding why I was doing the things that I was doing. Going back to escaping. There was a lot of escapism there. So for me, cycles was a big part of it. It was like understanding my cycles, in particular the weed, because I'll revert back to the weed, because it was a big part of who I was. Like, I actually identified as a stoner, high performance stoner, and I kept going through these cycles where I would smoke. I would smoke just like, regularly on the night, but then through overworking, like working a lot on my business, working every single hour that I had, I'd ended up, I used to be able to go from, get everything done all day, get everything done you need to do, then at the end of the night, have a smoke. And that was great. But then going through these cycles of where I'm just overworking and then just having all of that pressure, it was like the weed was an escape, and it was like, now I can relax. And then, having that relaxation period, I don't know, just anytime maybe I was thinking about business, because I'd think about stuff a lot, about every different part of it, back before I was even managing things properly on tasks or anything like that. And I think it was just overwhelming. And the easiest thing for me to do was something that I knew, and that is to smoke weed. But the more that I did it, the more that it just crept into my life even more. And I'm talking like, I would wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go to the toilet, and I would smoke a bong and I would go straight back to sleep. I was smoking bongs before work. At one point, it got really bad where I lived in central London and my office was like 5 minutes away. I'd go home, I'd take the dog out, I'd smoke a little spliff, I'd spray myself with aftershave, and I'd go back into the office. And I'm like that. When I look back at that, I'm like, what the fuck was I doing? Like, how anybody didn't notice? I was such a high functioning stoner, and I feel like that was why I kind of got away with it for so, not got away with it, but continued to do it for so long, like with ease, because I could function.
And it's very easy to justify it too, because at that point you're thinking, well, I've got all of this output happening, I'm still getting stuff done. And of course, there's an argument to say, well, it makes you more creative and it relaxes you and the different impacts it can have. So I can imagine it's very easy to rationalize in your brain, oh, this is fine, this is a part of who I am. And as you said, it becomes your identity, right?
It does. And I used to, I tell myself these things all the time, because don't get me wrong, for anybody who's listening, if you're a stoner, there's nothing wrong with it. There's only a problem with it if it's a problem for you and if it's affecting your life. If you abuse it, then it can become a problem, which that's what happened for me. If you're somebody who likes a little spliff at the end of the night to wind down and, it's not affecting your life, hats off to you, like, respect. There's a lot worse things you could be doing. And in reality, the weed, like, if you look at the history of it, it comes from a kind of very spiritual place, to be honest, and it can be used to get deep into meditation and stuff. And but yeah, when you're abusing something, it's not good. And when it's taken over your life to a point where all you think about is, if I was at work and I had weed in the house, it'd get to like the afternoon, just as I'm like kind of, maybe my mind's kind of like coming off the night before where I'd been smoking, and I'd start thinking about weed. I couldn't wait to finish, to get through that door and to smoke a bong. And it was that bad, literally. And I looked at that, and one of the things I understood about that was I wasn't working on anything. Some of these times I wasn't working on anything. I didn't have any kind of purpose. I wasn't driven to do anything. And for me, finishing 9 to 5, it was easy to just change the state. Walk through the door, go from busy day at work to just change the state and just be like, this is nice.
Yes. And like you said, I think it can be used in a lot of healing processes as well. And it can expand your mind. So I do wonder where the line is. How do you know when you're abusing something versus, okay, this is just something I enjoy? And I remember speaking to a former heroin addict, and he defined addiction as if you purposely try and eradicate something from your life, if you're constantly thinking about the thing when you would usually be doing it, that's a sign that you're addicted. Is that something that you resonate with, perhaps? And how did you notice it was a problem and not just a part of your way of being? How did you snap out of it?
When I realized it was a heavy problem, this was through COVID, and I was working in IT. I was working for this law firm, and I was on the phone to a lord, and I was helping him with an IT issue, and I'm waffling onto him, and this is when I was working from home throughout COVID, and I'd probably been smoking on the morning, and I remember just talking to him, waffling on, and then I was just like, why am I even on the phone to this guy again? What was his IT issue? And then I was like, whoa, I got off that phone call and I was like, hold on a second. Like, this is now starting to affect your work. You've went from this productive stoner, this, functioning productive stoner, to you're forgetting things while you're on the phone to people. Like, and I was just like, this is a bit of a problem for me. And then I'll go back to New Zealand again, like, because this was like a pivotal moment in my life when I was there. So that was my first break from weed, a first proper break from weed in all those years. I'm talking, so when was I there? 2018. I'd been smoking for maybe 15, 16 years already. And New Zealand was my first proper break from that. the first time I actually was able to fully think. So, you don't even realize, but if you're doing it even if you were doing it every week, don't have that clear mind that you do. Even when you're drinking if you're drinking once a weekend, you do not have the same mindset that you do when you go a prolonged period of time without taking any substances. That was my first break away from weed, from alcohol, for 10 weeks, and I was so switched on. I was just like, I was smashing out the work. I started to record a lot of my calisthenics stuff. I was learning to edit. I was like just on my shit, like for the first time ever in my life, with such a clear mind. I felt 3 times as productive as I was the person already. And then that for me was like, okay, now I know what I'm capable of, and now I know I can. And now, you know, getting to New Zealand, the other side of the world, everything paid for, working for the best law firm in the world, put up in a lovely apartment. I was standing on the balcony and I was like, okay, if I can get to the other side of the world, right, working best job I've ever had, doing something I don't even really care about, what can I do if I focus on something that I'm passionate about? Like, how far can this go? And then that was like a penny drop moment. I was like, shit, I need to actually leave this job and focus on something that I love to do, because then, the possibilities are I'm going to say it, limitless. It's insane. Like, that was a moment for me. It was just like, fuck, I've got to leave this job. I've got to quit this job. So, and it was like amazing.
It awakens you. It really awakens you. And this is what I believe happened to me a bit as well. When I stopped drinking alcohol, I didn't really have an alcohol problem. Like, I wasn't there every day after work or after uni or whatever. I'd never sit there with a bottle of beer. But on nights out, I would drink loads. I would have maybe a bottle of rum, one of those 750 milliliter ones. And then I'd go out and then I'd have more VKs, they called them, shots, pints. It was disgusting. And God knows where I'd be if I kept on doing that every weekend. But I found that once I took a break from alcohol for just 6 months, I found that the my brain started changing. I was thinking differently, and it awakens you to reality a bit. And this is why I say to people, if you want to change your life, and you have got something, it might be that you're a stoner, it might be that you drink consistently. I think give it a go. The least you can do, if you're serious about changing your life, just give it a go. If you can do a year, amazing. And a lot of guys I speak to, they'll do sober October, dry January, and they will feel the impact of it. They'll feel better, but then as soon as we go back to normal life, they're the next month they're back into the cycle. So I think we're complex as humans. Even though we know something would be good for us, I think there's resistance there. And I can imagine when you first started smoking, there was probably a lot of resistance. It was very difficult. I know withdrawals are quite an interesting subject because naturally, of course, it makes sense. If you have been using a substance for a while, naturally your body's going to be used to it. And when you suddenly pull those things away from it, it's going to react. Although I think we can place quite a big emphasis on this and it can be used as an excuse to indulge in something.
Mm-hmm.
So, did you see resistance when you first stopped smoking, or did you see it as an opportunity? And then coming out of that, when you had an increase in this productivity, did that give you the vision then? Did that wake you up to what could be?
Yes. So, when I had this first break from it, so I was going to New Zealand, and in my mind, I was like, I'm not gonna not gonna try to get it. I was over there. I didn't know anybody. I wasn't going to pursue getting any. And when I got there, it was like a fresh canvas in my brain. So part of addiction and wanting to use substances, whatever it is, there's like things in our brain that cause triggers. So that could be, I was walking through. I walk in the door, and for me, it was like a trigger would be putting the kettle on, coming in from work, putting the kettle on, and that was a cue for me to then do the next thing, which would be to be smoke a bong. So my brain's used to that, but now I'm in a different location. I don't have those triggers and those cue points set up to then want to do the next thing. Physically, though, I remember the first few nights without it, I sweated buckets. Mental dream I hadn't dreamt properly, like probably for years. I'd soaked through like t-shirts. I had to put towels down on the bed. I remember being in the office and just like even throughout the day, just having like massive sweat on. And yeah, so this year with weed, like you don't go through withdrawals as you would like heroin or whatever. It's not a physical, it's a mental. But I disagree. I mean, the other thing is it could be the chemicals in the plant, what they grow it with, that maybe you're having that withdrawal from. But certainly, who I've spoken to, like a lot of stoners have went through this same thing. You know, you, like I've had this multiple times when I've stopped and started. I've went through the 3 nights, 4 nights of sweats and just restless, like you're tossing and turning and you're just not thinking the same. You know, you're sweating that much to a point where I can actually smell it coming out of us. I can smell weed coming out of us. So definitely from a physical sense, but from a mental point of view, it was like I was in a new location. I didn't crave it. Didn't crave it. I barely even craved it. I could have had it. I could have had some, but I wasn't like, oh, I really need some. I wasn't going out to try and find it or anything like that. So yeah.
Well, this is why a change of environment's so important, because once you have a change of environment, it's a game changer. You don't even have the connections to source whatever you want to source. You're surrounded by different people, and I can imagine back when you were younger, you were surrounded by people who were also indulging in these activities as well, and there's almost going to be a sense of conformity there because that's the role, that's the identity they have of you, and naturally you're going to conform to that. So it's not even just about the triggers in your own environment, but the outer world as well. So I'm really keen to hear about how your environment changed in your new location in terms of now you've got different people around you. Because usually when we decide we want to change, it can be very lonely. We're no longer surrounded by the same people who are reinforcing these habits. So, did you have that, or did you find that the people you're surrounding yourself with were conducive to this new version of you were about to step into?
Yes. So in when I was in New Zealand, I didn't actually recognize this lonely period, but I did spend a lot of time by myself, like on an evening and stuff like that. But I was just in my training. I was working on learning to edit and all sorts of things. So I was busy from the moment I went to sleep till the moment I woke up, or the other way around, from the moment I woke up till the moment that I went to sleep. So I didn't notice this. However, um, I'll I want to backtrack a little bit because where when I moved to London, this was before New Zealand. When I moved to London, I already recognised that, you know, when you're around, you know, your friends and stuff who do these types of things, it is harder to break away from that. It's harder to break away from these cycles because, you know, that's all we knew. That's all we did. That was how we socialized. You know, we have a drink or we have a smoke, and it is quite hard to kind of like break away from that when you're around people, especially, you know, your best friends. So when I did move to London, I was aware of this, and I actually said to myself, uh, this was kind of the beginning of stopping drinking. I was just like, I'm not going to pursue making friends. When I go there, I'm just going to do me. I'm going to work on myself, you know, and I'm not going to try and make any friends because I did not want to fall into the same cycles that I was doing. I didn't want to go and move away to the other side of the country and then just start doing the same things every weekend that I was doing before. So, um, so yeah, that time was a bit of a lonely time. It was figuring out who I was, what I wanted to do, I didn't want to do the drinking stuff every weekend, and I was a little bit, a bit down sometimes. But then when I got into calisthenics, that was when that all changed for me. So I I got introduced to calisthenics by my coach. I was just doing bodyweight stuff in the gym, and then met him, and then started getting some regular sessions. But then when it all changed, when my mindset changed from I'm not making any friends to actually just need to make the right set of friends, he invited me down to a calisthenics park, Royal Oaks, for the first time, and this was on a Saturday. And I always like use this expression. It's like I went from going to the bars on the weekend to actually going on the bars, like training, doing the calisthenics on the bars, and just surrounded by people who are, there was some insane like level athletes there, training, doing like mental stuff that you only see on like viral videos, and like that changed for me because I started to make a lot of friends down there, and I would go down every Saturday, and each time I went down, I was learning new skills, I was making new friends, and that's when the penny dropped for us. I was like, I don't need to be on this kind of lonely journey. I just need to actually surround myself with people who aren't going out on a weekend or whatever. Um, so yeah, the environment and who you hang around with plays a massive part in who you become.
Mm. Yeah, massively. And I think it's important to know as well. I think this lonely period, I think it is almost part of the man's journey in a way. I think you kind of do need to go off and navigate a lot of this stuff internally because, like you said, when you break away from the pack, it creates that separation. Then you can focus on yourself, start asking questions about who you want to be. And that's where you build up the character traits, which will then put you in good stead for where you want to be in the future. But then you also mentioned something there, finding this calisthenics group. And I find also indirectly the people you're surrounding yourself with there, they're inspiring you to do better as well. Because you're seeing these guys do some really cool stuff and you're thinking, hey, I want to do that. And you model after them. And I've seen this time and time again on the podcast where people have maybe had a troubled start in life, but then they found martial arts, they found something that grounds them. And I think it's also giving you a new identity because before you were the functioning stoner, high functioning stoner, that identity's been broken. So then you have the struggle. Who am I? Who do I want to become? And then this has gone into your life, which I think is fantastic. Now you've got a new identity. I can be an athlete. I can do lots of cool stuff. And there's people here who who I resonate with as well. And suddenly you've got a community, you've got an identity, and from there, the only way is up, right?
Definitely. And getting inspired, I really did, and it's kind of each time I was going, I was getting better because I was learning more, I was training hard, and then it was just like it goes back to this moment of if somebody else is a human and they can do it, I can do it. Yes, it's going to take a lot of work, but I can do it. And then it's just like that belief's been with us like for so many years. I don't really look at anybody different. I don't look up to celebrities or anything like that. I'm just like, we're all human. We can all do great things. We're all capable of great things, whatever that is. Um, so yeah, and then the more that you do it, and some of these skills that you work on, they might take 6 months to a year to actually learn and do, and then that just rewires your brain into, if I can do this and I can spend a year focusing on this and look at what I've achieved, I can do anything in life. I can do anything I set my mind to do.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you're limitless at that point. Once you understand fundamentally that change is possible and you can do anything if you put your mind to it, then the possibilities are there. And the more people you meet, the more opportunities you take. I think that's going to continue to expand. I know in my case, when I've been putting off a certain task or whatever, I find that once I do that thing, it could be posting some content on a platform, it could be networking with certain types of people. That then creates a different pathway in my brain, and then I get more creative ideas and more creative ideas. And this is again why surrounding yourself with the right types of people, they will do that to your belief system, because they'll start having conversations. And I know they've done studies on this now. If you surround yourself with a group of high performing people, I don't think they have to be in conversation with you. I just think if you're in the vicinity, then that can have a huge impact on not only your belief system, your vibration as well. So I think that's a massive, massive point in your journey. I'd also like to hear about this hardworking mentality, right? Because you believe change is possible, and you're becoming further and further removed from the identity you set for yourself before. So I'm keen to hear about your work rate and the inevitable setbacks that come with that. Because again, it's a whole other lesson. You found your mission, you're embodying that warrior energy now, but then that's where you've got a new set of challenges. So talk me through how you sort of came across those and how you managed to overcome these as well.
Yeah. My work ethic, unless like forever, unless I was hungover, was work hard. My dad always said if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing properly. And if in my mind, it's like I'm there to work and do a good job. I get paid for this, not to mess around or anything. However, obviously, when you're hungover and stuff, that is a bit different. But that kind of work ethic, I've always had a strong work ethic. The beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, I had a hot tub hire company, and I would prep the hot tubs the night before, fill up the van, and then I'd go to work in the morning. I'd finish work at 4 or 5 o'clock. I'd get changed in my van in the car park, and I'd go straight on to putting hot tubs out. And I had I was working a lot, at the time, making what I thought was like good money, which it was, having a small business, and then, that's bringing in extra money a week, and then earning good money from IT. And, very driven, but what you don't realize, we, we think we're invincible, right? And when you're busy, 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 and you doing, you think you're invincible until you hit that point. So you're working all hours on an evening, on weekends, you're working 9 to 5. Eventually, something's going to give. Not only that, you're training as well. Eventually, something is going to give. You are only human. You only have so much capacity. And then that's when burnout happens. And burnout can look different and show up differently in people's lives. For me, it was escaping, drinking, pouring a large gin or two on a night, and then smoking a couple of joints, which then had a knock-on effect to my work, which then had a knock-on effect to my business, because I was missing appointments or forgetting things. And then sooner or later, you go from this very high productive person, basically the all or nothing mindset, to everything starts going downhill, to a point where I had to put a pause on, actually, I can't do this anymore. So I'd stop doing the hot tub, and for me, if that was up to me, I'd just have to stop taking bookings. But in reality, if I'd have managed it better, I wouldn't have went through those burnout cycles. And for me, this is like a big part of what I'm wanting, a big part of what I'm teaching in here, is avoiding these burnout cycles, because as entrepreneurs, we there's not many people who won't go through burnout. And like I say, it can show up in different forms, really. Some people, they'll continue to work and work and work, but they will still drink on a night, but they won't, they'll not look after their nutrition. They'll just eat whatever for the sake of it. And then as weeks and months go on, they've just, dealt with this high level of stress. They react to things, but their lifestyle is horrendous. They're probably drinking most nights, or smoking, or doing whatever they do to escape it. They're eating shit food, and they wake up, they start reacting to message, like they start reacting as soon as they wake up, rather than just being more regulated. And like, actually, if you have proper structure to your life, you can avoid these burnout cycles if you do practices like, you know, even having downtime. Downtime is a big thing that people, it's like, you know, in the hustle grind culture, it's not heard of. It's like you've got to work every spare minute every morning. It's like, nah, that is a recipe for burnout. If you, the thing is, somebody said to me this earlier on this year. He's like, we were having this conversation. I was explaining. He was like, they're just busy fools. And I was like, that is an excellent explanation. You know, people might think that just because you're on the laptop 14 hours a day, that you are being productive and you're getting a lot done. When in reality, what's the last few hours of that look like? Because I know I've experienced it, and I still do to this day. You know, but you've got to reel it back in, and you know, even when I was building the app and stuff, I was like working late, and then I was like, hold on a second. I'm like writing this book, preaching this shit, and I'm noticing these cycles getting, and so then I had to reel it back a little bit and go, do you know what it is? This is the cutoff point. And you know what happens when you have that cutoff point? You wake up the next day and you've got a fresh mind, and you can do the things that you need to do rather than just staring at the screen, typing the same thing over and over again, or reading the same thing, like going through these things in your head, and you're like, why is this not clicking? Because you're overworking. Now, when you wake up the next day and you switch on the laptop after a good night's sleep, you'll all know when you have a good night's sleep, how much more productive are you? And so that term, being a busy fool, it's like, yeah, just because you're working doesn't mean that you're being productive. So it took a lot to understand that.
When your belief system is so tied to that idea of hard work equals success, and you've exposed yourself to all these belief systems, you don't realize that you're still controlled by your own belief system. It's such a tricky one to break. I know when I first came across this idea of slowing down and living in alignment, even when I tried to resist the urge to work more, there was so much resistance, and I found it so tricky, so difficult. And I believe now it's because as a kid, I had a low sense of self worth. And naturally, I think a lot of high performing men do come from that background. But because they found their worth in this thing, suddenly the addiction is no longer drugs or alcohol to boost it temporarily. It's, oh no, like this is my identity now. I'm the hard worker. And breaking out of that is so tricky because that's what I think you're dependent on for your sense of self. Oh no, I can relax. It's like, no, I can't. I've got to do this. I've got my mission. But it's deeply rooted for sure. And I wonder if that's something you can relate to.
1,000,000%, 1,000,000%. You know that, like you said, it becomes your identity. And the other thing is you become not only what you surround yourself with, or the people who you're with, or the environment. It is what you listen to and what you take in. So for me, I used to watch a lot of motivational speaking. This was like early on in my entrepreneurial journey. It's like, uh, and don't get us wrong, it's good in a way sometimes, but when it's programmed your mind to think that you have to work every single spare hour of the day, you know, like success is, you know, working all these hours. And it's like when you've got that programmed into your brain, and then you think about, you know, watching a film on a night, or you feel like having the afternoon off, you feel guilty for it. You feel guilty for it. You're like, I'm not doing enough. I need to be doing this. This is what it takes to be successful. The grind, the hustle culture, like, you know, I'm all for grinding, like, and working hard. But when it's, if you're overworking to a point where you are missing out on family time, you're missing out birthdays, events, things that are like actually really important parts of life, then how is that good? How is that successful? How is, just because you work all hours God sends and you've got this business, how is that a great thing if you're lacking in your family life, if you don't see your kids as much, and you know, you don't spend time with them? And it's like, what is success at the end of the day? Success to me is having success in all areas of life, you know, not just in the business, not just in the gym, but that's the relationships with the people who are like my friends. That's relationships with my family, you know. This is something that really I became aware of a few years ago when I was in this. I just work every minute, just like this tunnel vision, didn't see anything else. Now, I've got a niece and nephew who I love so much, and you know, they are grown up, and I'm not spending nowhere near enough time with them that I should be. And the penny dropped. I was just like, I remember being at home and I was just on my laptop and I was just like, do you know what it is? I haven't seen or spoken to anybody in weeks. I'm just got this tunnel vision, and I was just like, right, I'm going to start to have these kind of tech-free Fridays where I'll not do my business work, and I would, I would do something else, see family or whatever. And now I do have these, like every Friday, I see my niece and nephew. I see them every single week. And that for me, that is part of success. Like I explain it like this in my book. It's like things are so interconnected, right? With family, with business, with whatever. It's like if you've got a business, right, and you're working so hard on it, but you're working so hard that you barely make time for your family, are your family are going to resent you, and they're going to resent the work that you do. They're not going to be supportive of it, which at the back of your mind, that's going to be there, and you're going to be thinking about that, and that is an energy drainer in itself. So how can you be fully productive in your business if you've got that kind of that guilt, that energy drain in the back of your mind? Now, make some time for your family, put some time aside, dedicate some time to them. How is the relationships going to be? It's going to be better. Not only that, are they going to support you in, my dad's a hard worker, my dad's got this business. However, if you switch it around and you don't make time for them, they're not going to support you in it. They're really not. And like I say, it's just this life is so interconnected, and what people think success. I mean, success is subjective, isn't it? But for me, success is having my business, having the lifestyle that I want to live, but also having those good connections and strong relationships with people as well.
It's such a great point about family and close relationships. And what can happen is, because a lot of the time we project onto other people. So, like you said, you'll start off not making time for family, and then they will mention something, rightly so. And what happened in my case was I was projecting onto them and thinking, oh, they're trying to stop me from my mission. They don't believe in me. They're not supporting me. And that's how strong the belief, the delusion is. It's crazy. And I think one thing that has helped me is understanding that, as you've mentioned, the relaxation time, the more you spend time with quality people, the important people in your life, the more that's going to impact your business. So I think that's actually the message that we should be going out there. Because if you just tell people, oh, just rest, spend time with the family, of course it's important, but I still think you need to get to that inner world, that inner belief system, and really tackle that at the core. So if you twist it and say, hey, this will help your business, by you enjoying life will help your business, it'll make sure you're more regulated. I think that's the way to go. And with the Hormozis of the world, David Goggins as well, I think it can be, like you said, I think sometimes you need to kick up the arse, perhaps in the earlier stage of the journey. So when you were 13, 14, 15, if you were listening to David Goggins then, he probably would have been an amazing influence. But I think when you take that later on and you apply that to your working life as you've already moved through that stage, I think that's where it can be damaging, because you have a lot of people trying to become the next Hormozy, the next big business leader. And that's just another identity that they've taken on for themselves. They've seen somebody be successful in terms of their definition of success, but not everyone's going to be built that way. A lot of the time, people have built successful businesses because they've had a huge drive, or they're different. And this isn't to say you can't achieve amazing things yourself, but you'll have your own way about doing things. I think it's really important to mention that there's no one size fits all. Everyone's got different structures, systems. Test them out. And I think what's helped me recently to integrate this stuff is not focusing on how much I'm getting done, because there'll be a to-do list and you're never going to finish the to-do list. Like, you know this more than anyone. You're never going to finish the to-do list. So I'll just allocate time for doing a certain task, and then by reinforcing the task itself and just doing the task, not putting a number on it, then it's the habits. And so by focusing on the habits itself, not the amount you're getting done, I believe we can live a more peaceful life. I'm sure this is tied into the framework that you've created for yourself too.
Yeah. So for me, what I like to do is I set 2 to 3 hour blocks of time aside to do certain things. So in the morning, it's like deep focused work. That runs from like 6:30 in the morning till 9:30. And then after that, that's when I would book in calls to connect with people and, check on clients and stuff like that. And then later on in the day is, I'd break my day up in terms of like 3 hour block, which I usually do on the morning. I might be at the spa on the treadmill or working in the hotel, like where I go to. Then I'd come home, I'd take the dog out, and then I sit down for my next working block. And then after that working block, I might go to the gym, might take the dog out again, and then have some food, and then I do another working block on an evening. And it's for me, it goes back to that busy fool kind of expression. It's like sometimes if you're on the laptop for like 7 or 8 hours, how much of that time is productive versus if you take that 8 hours and split it throughout the day, you've had that reset, you've got that mental reset, you come back to it with a fresh mind. It's kind of just like it's like literally just restarting the PC, and it just starts working faster. So, and for me, I feel like I've got more balance to my life. It's structured in a really good way where I can clock up like 60 or 70 hours a week, and I don't feel like I'm overworking or anything, because I've scheduled in some time with family. I've scheduled in the gym. I've scheduled my morning routines is like my mobility or breath work or meditation. Having those times to just to reset. And yeah, for me, it's like it's so important. So important as being a high performer, somebody who works a lot. And it's just going back to recognizing those cycles of years ago of like, right, okay, this isn't the way to do it. This isn't the way to do it for me, because what happens when I do, I go through the cycle of burnout, and so I've got to have these periods where I do have these resets. And honestly, it's been a game changer in my life. Like, I'm so much more productive. I get a lot done. I feel fulfilled in every area of life. So yeah,
It's such a huge difference, I think, just having those systems in place. And by your journey, you can tell as well, it it throws you further into alignment. And I think a lot of the resistance we have, which does lead to burnout, we ignore that. We're kind of just no, we'll get more done. But I think if we just listen to the signs, and I love that you mentioned breath work there, meditation, just calming the mind, that makes such a huge difference. And I can really relate to the long breaks as well. Like when I've gone off for a weekend and just completely switched off and been fully present, I get so much more clarity about the business as well and about life, and everything just slows down and everything looks a lot more simple in a way. You just have a lot more clarity.
uh,
So I'd love to delve into your specific practices as well. You mentioned obviously meditation there, breath work. I know everyone's got a different way in which they incorporate these tools into their life, but yeah, tell me a bit about that.
so the breath work came from going back to New Zealand. Got into yoga, Ashtanga yoga, which then led me to Bali Yoga School, which then led to me training with a yoga teacher online throughout COVID. And then I actually injured my knee, and didn't want to stop practicing yoga, because yoga, I don't know if you know much about it. It's not just the asana, it's not just the movement. It's 8 limbs of yoga, and one of those limbs is pranayama, which is breath work. And when I actually tapped into the power of breath work, that was like my meditation to start with. I'd never been able to sit there, like, and like sit there and be present. And that was a bit of a game changer for me. And over the years, I've kind of went away from it and then got back into it. And earlier this year, I got back into it, and it's one of the best things that I've actually started to implement into my mornings again. And for me, how I like to do it, so I'm all about habit stacking and kind of taking the time that I've got and how can I kind of tick off not as many things, but how can I be productive with this time where I can use it to my advantage? So my morning session, I would do 30 minutes, and it would be like 15 minutes movement, 15, 20 minutes movement, 10 minutes of breath work. And then I follow that up with a meditation. But my meditation is kind of like a visualization meditation where I will visualize the person who I want to become, visualize things in my business, visualize my future. Then what I do is tie in my gratitude with that. So, okay, how does it feel to become that person? And one of the feelings that I like to tie to it, because it's such a powerful one and it's such a powerful way to start your morning, is gratitude. Is just being thankful. Because the thing is, your brain does not know the difference between a made up experience and the actual experience. So if you're visualizing something in your mind and you can see it down to the finest detail to a point where you start to feel that emotion, that's when it starts to rewire your brain and starts to break those limiting beliefs as well, and allows you to actually do the actions that you need to do to become the person that you want to be. So I tie in my breath work. I do the movement, mobility, and then I follow that up with the breath work, and then I follow it up with the visualization, and then kind of closing it off with the gratitude, and then like literally just saying thanks, to whatever, to God, the universe. And there are different styles of breath work. There's any amount of different styles of breath work. Sometimes it's a very slow, controlled, called Nadi Shodhana, and it's alternate nostril breath work. Sometimes it's right. I need a little bit more energy this morning, and so it's called what is the name of it? It's Bastrika is one of them. It's breath of fire. Uh, if you know Tony Robbins, or if you've heard of Tony Robbins, he calls it the breath of fire, and he does it as part of his priming routine on a morning, which is a like forceful inhale, exhale. So there's that. If you're just wanting a little bit more energy, sometimes when I'm sitting in the sauna or steam room, I'll even do it. Some of my mornings are different, and sometimes I don't do the breath work at home. I'll do it in the sauna or steam room. And you can even do it when don't do any of the forceful ones while you like not while you're driving, but if you're sat in traffic and you're feeling a bit anxious or whatever, just return to your breath. Even just doing some box breathing, like breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds, or sat in the car. I mean, people might see you like driving past and think, is he picking his nose or something when you're doing this kind of thing? But you can use breath work for to set yourself up for the day, to relax you before going to sleep on a night, or times that you might get anxious, just return to the breath. So yeah, that's when I like to incorporate it, is in the morning, because it sets me up for the day. It allows me to think more clearly. It allows me to visualize stronger. Like I get more stronger visualizations doing the breath work than the meditation, versus just trying to go straight into meditation. Um, the reason I do the mobility first is, if you're trying to sit cross-legged or whatever, and you're just tight from like training and you've been asleep all night and you sat there, if you're thinking about the tightness in your hips, it's hard to take your mind somewhere else. So if you're like sat here, you're trying to do breath work, you're, oh, do you know what it is? My hips are tight here. But you've already done that. You've loosened off your hips. Okay, and now you're ready to sit. Now you're ready to sit and do your breath work or your meditation. So for anybody who maybe does do the meditation or breath work, and they do have that problem where they're getting tight or whatever, and they can't seem to just be present. Try just doing a little bit of hip mobility before you start, because it is a game changer. And then the reason I do the breath work next is because when you are concentrating on the breath, it's hard to concentrate on anything else, so you're focused. So that allows you to clear your mind. And then when you move on to the visualization, the meditation, the visualization is a lot stronger because you've got a blank slate. Now think of the thing without having all these different things going on in your brain. So I hope that answered the question.
Definitely so. Definitely so. And it's a good reminder for me too to incorporate some of the mobility stuff in the morning routine, because as I've seen firsthand, even recently, as you get older, you're more susceptible to having falls, you're not as mobile. And I think we have a tendency as young men to put a lot of that stuff off. Yeah, it's all about, okay, go to the gym, do your work, and you kind of take your health for granted. Whereas I think if we can do the small things now, just doing 10 minutes of mobility a day, I'm sure you're aware of the compounding effect. It will just continue to mount up, and it makes a huge difference over time. My sister's very passionate about this. She's a yoga instructor, and for her, she's very passionate. She'll say, "You've got to be moving your body every day. You've got to be doing this because it's gonna bite you in the arse someday." And I've seen that. I've seen that myself. So it's a good call for me. I love the box breathing as well. Just imagining a square, for example, and then four hold, four down. It's brilliant, and it's important to mention as well. This could sound overwhelming if you haven't got a routine already, but I think just start with one. Just try different ones out, see what works for you, and again, it reinforces that discipline. You don't need to do. I know there's a common meme or argument against it, having 42 things in your routine before you start your day, and everyone's like, oh, it's easy for you to say you don't have three kids and you're not doing all this sort of stuff. But yeah, I think if you can take 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, just ease into it, see what works for you. I think that can be great. And I'm really intrigued by this visualization exercise too, how it ties in with manifestation and the idea that, like you alluded to, the subconscious doesn't know what's real and what's not real. So if you act as if you've already got the thing, then you will attract opportunities and people on that same frequency. So this I'm really interested in. But I'm also interested in the conversation about goals as well. Because on the one hand, I know they talk about getting very clear about what your goal is, right? And how being very specific about what you want and putting your mind to it can be very beneficial in terms of a manifestation technique. But then I also have delved into the law of attraction and how when you want something really badly, it usually pushes you away. It's a bit like any kind of situation. A good example is with a cat. If you're going after the cat and you want to have a cuddle with the cat, it's going to run off and be repelled by you. Whereas usually it's when you're minding your own business, the cat will just naturally come and sit by you. So I wonder, in terms of your process, the visualization exercises, how do you balance that then? Being very specific, as you alluded to, about your goal and your mission, but then also learning to pull away from it and not want it so badly that you push it away, if that makes sense.
So here's the difference: is like if you visualize it that strongly to a point where you feel the emotion and you tie the emotion to it, you've already got it. So there's not that kind of resistance. But if you're somebody who's thinking about it 24/7 and thinking about how do I do this, how do I do that, I should going into every little detail, that's when I think that you can be pushing it away. But I feel like for me, it's like, who's the person I want to become? I want to be, you know, um, I want to be this high performer in my business. I want to be an elite calisthenics athlete. And it's like, I want to be able to live between here and Bali. And it's like, what does that feel like? And it's like, you have the visualization, you feel the emotion, and then it's like, okay, what are the things that I can do? What are the things that I can do to get to this point? For me, I try not to put solid timelines on goals or things that I want, because that's when you start to, that's when there's friction, because you're like, right, fuck, it's 3 months away, and I'm still nowhere where I should be. Where should you be? It's like, in my mind, it's like I've got these visualizations, I've got these things, but in the meantime, I'm going to do everything that I can do this year to get us one step closer, but try and not to force it, try and not to be so focused on it to a point where you're not manifesting it, you're actually pushing it away, because you're actually saying to the universe, I don't have this, I don't have this. The difference between the visualization is you're visualizing it that strongly that you already have this. Now, I'll explain this for some people, in terms of like, the brain does not know the difference between the actual thing or a made up experience. Now, how many of you have thought of a scenario in your head and got angry to a point where you feel that little bit of an adrenaline rush? That didn't even happen. You're making up these things in your mind, and your body is reacting to it because your brain's saying this is actually happening. So the same thing can work in terms of visualizing the things that you want to become, or uh, visualizing, even lifting in the gym. Before you go to do that deadlift, is like actually walk through it in your mind, like, right, this is it. Visualize us picking it up. It's going to be hard, but I'm going to do this. That's where it started for me. The visualization, it didn't start in meditation, it was actually lifting. And it was like, okay, just replay this in my mind and just look, okay, this is what I want to do, and then stand forward, take hold of the bar and stand up, deadlift, done. And it worked. And it was only, recent years when I got into kind of manifestation, like proper visualization, that I realized this, was such a powerful thing. There's been other scenarios. There's an experiment where, two sets of people, they had this piece of music. They give it to one set of people and says, right, you go and practice that on the piano. They give it to the other set of people and they said, right, we want you to imagine playing this on the piano. Both of them had very similar kind of brainwave activity, and when it came to actually playing that piece of music, the guys who hadn't played it before, just because they were imagining, playing the keys in their mind, played it as good as the people who had been practicing it. So there's a lot to be said for visualization, and it's not this woo woo, hippie nonsense. It's like, it's powerful stuff. Like, it is powerful stuff. Ask any athlete, any great sportsman, like, did they see the thing before it happened? Did they see it in their mind? Did they see them, whatever it is, scoring the goal? Did they see themselves, if it's basketball, doing the slam dunk, or whatever that is? Did they see it before they did? Because a lot of the time you need to believe it so that you can achieve it. And again, so if I'm just like, oh, I'm going to become an elite calisthenics athlete, and I don't see that in my mind, when it comes to those times where I should be going to the gym, or should be doing this, or doing this type of training, it's like I can have those self doubts, because in my mind maybe I don't believe it. But if I've visualized it, and my brain already has understood the emotion and tied the emotion to it, and already believed that this is possible, then it is possible to do the thing, and it just makes things easier. And that can be in training, that can be in life, in business, in whatever that is. So have the visualization and the belief, but you don't need to obsess about it throughout the day, and you don't have to go into the nitty gritty of everything, of like, how do, like, sometimes you don't know how. You've just got to work towards these things. Sometimes it's getting somewhere, or achieving something, or like, you know I don't know, getting into the right business or something. It could be attracting that person. It could be a certain person who you have a conversation with, who you've kind of attracted into your life through doing these things. So
Yes. Yeah, I see that. I see that a lot, and I also see how when you incorporate the universe, God, however you want to call it, we have a tendency to, instead of trust our path, we have a tendency to try and force the outcome. We have a tendency to try and like, this has to happen by a certain date. We have to reach this by a certain date. And you're kind of interfering with the natural flow of life in that way. So I think having both, I think the trust in your process and the goals, sure, and make stuff happen, but then also kind of relinquish control as well. Now, I've also seen this the other way too. So I've met a guy from Congo recently, and he told me that it's a very Christian country. And the disconnect he sees is the complete opposite way, where they'll go to church and all they're told as kids is just pray to God, everything's going to be okay. Just pray to God, everything's going to be okay. But they're not actually doing anything to reach their goals. So he's one of the few who's actually stepped out of that and met God halfway. So I think you can go two opposite ways there, relying too much on the universe to save you, but then also not trusting the universe enough. So I think it's a really tricky balance to get, definitely.
I think it is. You're right there. For me, like I was putting this like at the beginning of the year, I was like, I want to get back over to Bali. And I was like, I'm going to be in Bali by August, and I was and I can push. And then now I'm just like, do you know what it is? I'm going to go back when I'm ready to go back, when the time is right. You know, when not trying to force things. And in the meantime, I'm going to continue to work hard. I'm going to continue to work on my business. I'm going to continue to just the other thing is just enjoy where I'm at and be present with where I'm at and enjoy the journey. And you know, for me, Bali's always going to be there at the end of the day. I don't need to force a timeline for it. Like I don't need to be like I have to be there. I don't have to be anywhere. But sometimes, and you know, these things creep back in. You can't just always be, you know, there or there. You know, you can be going through these times where you're like, right, I've got faith. I've got faith. I'm going to do the hard work. But then there is times where you're just like, this has to happen. You know, I need to fucking make this work. And it's a hard balance it is a hard balance to find, like you're right.
Yeah, definitely so. I think there's a lot we can learn from your story, not only in terms of your comeback and how you've managed to shift your identity and environment, but then also the way you approach life now. And life's very complicated. It doesn't always go the way we expect it to, which leads me to the closing traditions, because we've had a couple questions around this subject already from our live audience, which is awesome. The first question is a question from myself, same as the second question. And then the third one is when we'll go into the live chat. So the first question I have for you is a song recommendation.
My song recommendation, Bob Marley, the Every Little Thing is going to be all right. Don't worry about a thing.
Three
Because
Little
every little
Birds.
thing
Yeah.
is going to be like three little birds, yeah.
Mm,
Because
yeah.
it is and that actually takes me back to Ibiza. We used to be that was the first time I started listening to Bob Marley when I was like feeling depressed off partying, and then we would put Bob Marley on and be like, everything is going to be all right, you know, whatever you've got going on in life, you know, your problems are very relevant, but in the end, you know, with time every little thing will be all right.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. And it's an important thing for the man to remember too. It doesn't matter what your struggle is, it's going to be all right eventually. Everything's temporary, and as we've seen through your story, there's ups and downs, and you just keep on going, and it will dissipate. Certainly, I love that.
Just while we're on that there was something that came up recently talking to my brother about this. It's like life is like a pendulum, and if things are going one way, there's only so far it can go before it goes the other way. So if you are struggling, if you are having a bad time in life, if things are against you, just know that it's going to go the other way. just hang on in there.
Yeah, and we kind of need that yin and yang. We need these opposites to attract in a way. You got to have the good times to have. You got to have the bad times to have the good times, and I think it's a good way of understanding the world too. In my recent discussions, people say, "Oh, there's so much evil in this world." The argument is you need that evil, I think, to have the good. And again, incorporating the Bob Marley song too. Everything's going to be all right. If you have that belief system, you can influence your reality. If you believe everything's going to be good, if good's going to win over evil, then I believe we can create that, certainly. The second question is a book recommendation.
Book recommendation. My book, Becoming Limitless. I recommend this book. The reason being, this goes live tomorrow. But no, any other book, I would say The Science of Getting Rich. Or does it have to be one book?
I mean, the more the merrier, buddy.
The Four Agreements, The Science of Getting Rich. But this book right here, I might as well plug it on the podcast because I spent a lot of time writing this. This is, a bit more in depth of what we've talked about. My journey from burnout to balance, from chaos to clarity, from average to limitless. But it's got my 6 pillars in, 6 pillars of the limitless lifestyle. So it takes you through my journey. It'll take you through each pillar, but it'll explain like how I got into certain things and the why, the how, the everything. There's some science stuff in there, like it's got everything we talked about: the visualization, the gratitude, all my different practices that I do, life lessons, mindset. Like there's tons of stuff in there. So yeah, I recommend Becoming Limitless.
Yeah, I recommend it as well. I was fortunate enough to receive a very exclusive
You're
copy.
the only person who's getting that, So
yeah, I got.
So no,
yeah, I got it before it went live, and yeah, wicked suggestions as well. I know the 4 agreements. There's like a mini one. I remember asking it for Christmas once, and there was like a big one, a proper one, the 4 agreements, and then there was like a mini book as well, which you can keep in your pocket. It's so small, but it's kind of a cool way to carry it around. Yeah,
that's good. That
really cool. So it's like a little.
That is such a good book. Such a good book.
Yeah, we'll put all of these in the description.
It helps you understand a lot of things, doesn't it? It helps you understand a lot from kind of childhood and stuff, and it helps I think that every parent should listen or read that book. 1,000,000%.
Certainly. What we'll do, we'll move into the live questions. We've had a couple. So Jamie says, lots of value in this episode. Thank you both. And says, what's one thing you tell your younger self, knowing what you know now about what's possible?
One thing I would tell myself: you're going to overcome adversities. You're going to get through this, and it's my younger self. It's not always going to be about. It's not always going to be like this, and you've got a beautiful life ahead of you.
Yeah, that's all, and you probably wouldn't need to change anything either because that's your journey. That's the journey that you're going on.
I literally wouldn't. I wouldn't change it. I really wouldn't, because without the struggles, the adversity, without all these things growing up, you wouldn't shape into the person that you become. So I actually wouldn't. I wouldn't change anything.
It's a good reminder for people listening as well. Even though it seems like a terrible situation at the moment, there is another side to it, and eventually you'll look back at these times as blessings. Certainly. Another question we got was from Martine, who says, "I understand the need for discipline and rhythm in daily life, but life has a way of throwing the unexpected at you. Then what? How do you catch up with yourself?"
Life isn't straightforward, you're right, and there's always going to be things that happen, and some things can't be helped. And if you need to step away from whatever you're doing and take some time for yourself, sometimes it's okay, and you don't need to feel guilty about it. It's quite everybody's got different circumstances, different business, different lives, different responsibilities, and I do understand that. But I recognise, I won't give myself a hard time if something comes up and I don't complete the third work block of my day, well, it's not the end of the world, is it? I'll crack on tomorrow. Tomorrow is a new day. And it goes back to, do everything that you can do this day to the best of your ability. Now, do everything that you can do. If something happens, that's as much as you could do that day, because something came up and something happened. It's when you start to let things just become an excuse. Oh well, this happened, so that couldn't do it. If it's just something where you just write the whole rest of the day off because this little thing happened on the morning. So you write the rest of the day off and you go, well, I had a bad day today. I couldn't do this and I couldn't go to the gym because this morning, I had a flat tire and, I had a bad day and it just had a chain reaction to the rest of the day. You can still have discipline and, life can still get in the way and you can still have discipline around that. I'll give you for an instance, like my brother rang me now and says, can you have the kids? I would like, oh, there's an emergency, can you have the kids? I would have to say, thank you for having us on this podcast, but I'm gonna have to. I've got more important, like, no offense, I've got more important things to, and life will get in the way. But just remember, like, we're only human, and there's always going to be something. Just don't give yourself a hard time, and have that discipline when around life. You can still have discipline and still have things going on in your life. Yeah, I hope that answered the question.
It's a tricky balance to get sometimes. It's because I think a degree of negative self-talk can be helpful, but then it's when to make sure you're doing stuff that you can still do. And it's very easy to fall into excuses, but at the same time, it's the emotion, I think, attached to those excuses. Are you feeling guilty? And it's certainly something I'm ironically guilty of, is feeling guilty when I haven't done work. So it's a constant shift, I think. And I think it's by looking to embody that over time. I don't think it comes instantly, but I think when you notice, you got to notice, I think, what's coming up. And over time, I think you will cultivate that. But it's a process. It's a journey. And the whole of your life's been a journey. There's testament to that. And I think we'll continue to go through tough times. We'll continue to have good, prospering times. And so I suppose the overall message is just to embrace whatever life throws your way. Yeah.
The other thing, there's another way you can look at it as well, as all these situations are going to be different. But say something happens, okay, can I take a lesson from this? Is there something that I could have done that would enable me to still do this, this, and this? Okay, next time that something like this happens, these are the things that I'll do. These are the things that I'll put in place so that I can do X, Y, and Z. Do you know what I mean? So, like, for instance, if I somehow had responsibility on the morning, like if I had kids and I had responsibility they're my responsibility now, and I've got to get them ready for school and all this kind of stuff. But I still want to do my morning routine to get me set up for the day so that I can function better and be healthy and happy and be there for them. I will get up earlier to do those things that help me prime myself. So, rather than just go, well, I've got kids now, so I can't do this stuff. Or some of the things that I would do, this is something that I will do when I've got kids, is I'll introduce them to these practices. So, they'll get up a little bit earlier in the morning. This is why Daddy does meditation. This is why he does breath work, and introduce them to these things. And then you can kind of, you still spend it, you kind of ticking boxes. You not only having a good influence on your kids, you are learning them very valuable stuff that carry forward into life. But then you're still able to do these practices yourself that allows you to get yourself set up for the day.
Wicked. So many lessons from this episode, brother. So thank you for being so open and sharing your story. Where can people find you if they're interested in the work that you're doing?
Instagram, Jason Gutsell, or you can email me at jason@life101.app. That's my email address. But yeah, main place to find me is Instagram. I'm active there every day.
Wicked. Yeah, we'll put all of these in the description too. Thank you to our live audience for tuning in. We appreciate you being here. And thank you, Jason, once again. Truly an inspiration, brother.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.